I was very fortunate, much like yourself, mate. Came up through the Welsh FA system, working for the Football Association, various different roles, mainly coach educating and just being party to all that. And really at the time, I don't think either of us probably knew how lucky we were, the people we were around, the things we were doing, the sessions that we were sitting in on, just running around collecting balls on the A license, just lapping up everything possible. And after a period of years of that, the best apprenticeship you possibly could get, I went to Cardiff, and I think it was 2011. So I'd have been about 10 years in at this point, and I got a part-time under-15s role in the academy in the evenings. It was 2-3 evenings a week, and that's where I met a guy called Neil Ardley, who was the academy manager at the time, a former player. And Neil ended up appointing me as assistant under-18s coach 2 years later, or a year later. And I did 2 years full-time in the apprentice programme at Cardiff City. And that's when I really got on the grass every single day and learned about, what it was to be a coach, to deliver, to plan, to prepare, to evaluate. And it's really an interesting time in my career, really, where I started to kind of turn into this individual development coach, if you like. And that really, it was by necessity. It wasn't out of choice. There was some fantastic staff there at the time. Obviously, Neil started as academy director. Wonderful coach, mentor of mine, a guy who got me started called Lee Skirmo, I know you've worked with as well. Skirmy was I think he's at the FA now. I'm sure he's with the successful under-17s team that won the World Cup. He was the football development officer in Merthyr, and he was also the youth development coach at Cardiff City. I was the assistant coach. So Lee would do a lot of the coaching. Neil, as a former player, would do a lot of the coaching, and that kind of left me to carve out this niche of working with smaller groups or individual players on times. So it started out like that, really, and it became a career path for me, I suppose. For me, I've always been a coach who believes in concepts. I don't really have a system or a philosophy or one way of doing things, and I don't keep a Bible. And I'm not against that idea. I know a lot of people keep sessions, and they've got this unbelievable document that they add to, and that's their kind of Bible, if you like. For me, it's always been about concepts. So I break it down to like the process of what an elite player needs to do, and then break it down even further towards what that means tactically and technically. Let's take a winger, for example, or even Modric, like you said. What I noticed about Modric at the time was his awareness was certainly on a different level. His ability to scan and check and look for things. He's very rarely surprised. And we all kind of know scanning's important, checking your shoulders important. We've all coached the session where we say, check your shoulders. What I noticed was that this guy was doing it in a particular way. So I started to bring that to the table with the players. And I started to look at players at Cardiff, midfielders in Cardiff, who would only look over one shoulder or would look over both shoulders. And why did they look over both shoulders? Then I remember going to watch Man United play in the Champions League at Old Trafford, and rather than watch the game, I watched Paul Scholes. And I noticed that Paul Scholes would look over his left shoulder when the pressure came from a certain way, and he'd look over both shoulders when he felt like he had a bit more time. And I started to piece together this idea of, hold on a minute, there's something in this. And then I just put on sessions. I put on tactical sessions, technical sessions for midfielders, groups of midfielders, often players who were left out the team, players who weren't in the 11 doing the shadow play on the main field. And I would take them to the side and put on a multi-directional practice, which had a tactical direction of play. And I would, using the constraints that I had, I would engineer the same scenario and try and talk to them about this. And I would have, it was a little bit before iPads, but I would have a little bit of priming in the classroom beforehand of, look at these couple of examples. And then we'd go out and do it for 15, 20 minutes. And that's how it began, really. What you get from those people is they never relent, they never give up, they always want to give their best. They're always innovating, always learning, and nothing's ever too much trouble for them. The best people I've met, they're good people. They're really good people, and they want to know about people. They're not just in this kind of blinkered, well, it's all about me and what I can learn and what I can achieve. I watched every one of those people you mentioned on that list take time to get to know me or get to know other people that couldn't even do anything for them or put them on further in their career. I watched them all care about other people, and those are the things that stayed with me the most, I think.
It'd be brilliant for everyone to hear around like the maybe details of how you refined and worked with her to really bring out the best of what she could bring to the team.
Yeah, and this is some of the work I'm most proud of, some of my best work, if you like. Again, it comes down to the player, because even in our forward group, all those forwards were afforded the same opportunity. We work with all the players in that way, but sometimes you get players that kind of buy into it and really allow themselves to be coached and allow themselves to learn. And Jodie was certainly one of those. Jodie was, I think, because of where she'd come from in her career and the fact that she'd arrived late on the scene, she was trying to make up a little bit for lost time, but also she knew the power of, what I can take from this situation and put into my game will eventually, hopefully, be a difference maker. And what we did with Jodie was we kind of looked at her game, and it was all about starting positions. It was all about movement and deception. There was a tactical element to it for sure, in terms of the types of runs she needed to make. She was a superb traditional number 9 in terms of running in behind, supremely fast, wonderful acceleration, great first touch on the run. So for me, it was about, right, if that's what your superpowers are, how do we design a game model or a training environment that allow you to practice those things and get even better at them, and then more importantly, use them to influence the result of the game. Yes. We would talk about influence commitments. That was something that we designed between us, where for us it was about, well, if Jodie is so great at breaking the line between the two centre backs and running in behind, we needed to do it 6 times a game, 8 times a game, whatever the arbitrary number was. And we built a game model around allowing her to have that influencing commitment, because we knew if we get a one-on-one with a goalkeeper, every other time is going to be a goal, if not every time. So we did some functional practices, some half-field practices, unopposed practices with mannequins, where we worked on timing. For me, the biggest part that's missing, and this is the academic educational side that I was fortunate to go down a little route of, that kind of gave me this understanding, was there's a concept called performance action coupling, where basically the best way I can describe this is, if me and you play table tennis, if you were to throw me the ball, just bounce it over, and I was to hit it back, people would think that I was practicing and I would get better. And there's a certain amount of evidence out there, both academic and empirical, that would agree that you'll get better just by the nature of practicing. But what performance action coupling dictates is that I'm not only taking my practice of my shot, but I'm watching how you hit me the ball. So if you then serve the ball to yourself and hit it to me across the table, I'd be able to use all that perception to understand where the trajectory of the ball, what your body shape is like, what opportunity you're giving for me to hit a better shot to beat you, right? Now, without that information, there's a theory that you can't really learn something that transfers to a match. You can learn to do something and you can be good in training. How many players do we all know who can produce in a training session or a drill? But then when it comes to the actual match, there's too much of a gap between these two stimuluses, right? So I'm not a very academic guy. That's probably my level of understanding of it, right? But what I did was I ran with that, and I thought there's something in that. I did a bit of reading around it, watched a few videos, and I started to apply this to football. And for me, if you're going to go and step and then threatening behind and beat a centre-back and drag the centre-back forward onto their front feet so their weight is forward, and then exploit them in behind, you need something going on in front of you. And Jodie, in this case, with a number 8 or a number 10, where they receive a ball and the centre-back's not sure whether they should go forward or back. So I designed practices that had that pre-set up bit in it, as well as the movement bit that Jodie would need. So not only would she and the other strikers get the benefit of the movement and understanding what double movement is and how I get in behind, but also I've seen this before. My brain understands what I'm looking at, and the timing of what I'm doing is right. And I think for Jodie, one of the things that set her apart in 2017 at that Euros, you saw some of the goals she scored, her timing was impeccable. People didn't know where to run with her, when to run with her, how to start with her, how to stop with her. And I think really that's what it comes down to, is a combination of talent, of commitment, of allowing an elite player, allowing you to have that level of influence, and then you providing the framework, which has to be spot on. You won't get a second chance with these top players. You have to provide a quality, relevant framework around that. But if the two match together, there's success in it can be found for sure. Yeah. I think our biggest constraint in college soccer is, I call it constraint, but really the thing we have to think about the most is the students. They're student athletes, so they're here to learn first, and they're doing degree programs, 4-year degree programs, pretty much in the academic year. For a semester of about 16 weeks, they go to class every day. and if they're not in class, they have projects to finish and thesis to write and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So we are very fortunate to be at a school. It's not the same for every school in the country. We're very fortunate to be at a school which has unbelievable resource, unbelievable joined up thinking in terms of how student athletes can be best prepared and perform, because to be at the University of Oklahoma is a big deal. Like our American football team, I call it football team, our American football team is one of the most successful football teams in the country since the post-Second World War era. OU Sooner football is an institution. It's a religion to a lot of people. So our athletics department and the way that we do things here is high level as you can imagine. It would have been similar to the environments we would have found ourselves in with the FA in England and St. George's Park. So you have, on the one hand, you have all that, and then on the other hand, you have the balance of how you become a top football performer, soccer performer, but also gain your degree. So we're very fortunate that we get a window where academics are scheduled outside of. We train from 7 to 11, and we don't train for that straight period. We just can plan our activities between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. so they don't conflict with any classroom or academic commitments. So that's the biggest thing in terms of periodization, is how we prepare for 2 games a week, Thursday, Sunday, for 2 months of the year, because our season really is only September till November. And then, as with everything else in the States, it's all about the postseason, get into the tournament, qualifying for the postseason tournament, and then as a result of doing well in that, qualifying hopefully for what a lot of people might not know around the world is the NCAA tournament, which is the governing body of all of student sport. The top 64 teams in the country every year get to play on a knockout basis all the way down to the Final Four, and that's how the national champion is decided. So you go through your conference season, you do well, you get points, you get rankings, you get put in you get put in those top 64 teams all year, and then at the end, whoever's qualified or been chosen goes into that final tournament. So you can already see why it's different to perhaps a traditional English pro soccer club, or an academy which might train in the evening time and come in for one day release. It's a different set of circumstances altogether. Yeah. I spent 10-12 years in the men's game, and then in 2014 transferred to the women's game, and I've been in the women's game ever since. So I think when you read about the history of the women's game and what the women's game has become, and certainly the change has gone through in the last 4 years, never mind the last 10 years, I think it's always been a fight for a seat at the table, or a fight for equality, or a fight for really just, it's not about like men and women. It's not about what men do, what women do. You can go back to the 99ers, the famous American team that won the World Cup in 99, and you got Mia Hamm talking about, treat me like a woman, coach me like a man, or, treat me with that respect, with that emotional intelligence, with that level of understanding, but coach me hard, coach me right, tell me the stuff that you would tell a man, or whatever it might be. So for me, I mashed the two worlds together, and I've found that, when you have these playing principles, if you keep it to kind of easily retrievable information under pressure, because that's what it is. If you've got 40,000 people in the stadium screaming at you, or even if you're in conference play and it's a really important game against, a really important college, you've got to be able to retrieve this information under pressure. So anything more than 3 or 6 principles, they're going to be very difficult to stay on track. Now, it sounds simple to say only 6 principles, but you can imagine the work that goes in behind it, from a team point of view, a collective unit point of view, say the midfielders, and then an individual point of view in terms of whether I'm a 6, an 8, or a 10. Each one of those frameworks is built with a scaffolding of individual meetings, individual video feedback. One of the best things that Mark introduced this year with us is we used to kind of just get the players in, do an hour of video, look at this, look at that. I'm pretty good at that stuff. I can do that kind of stuff. But Mark was like, look, why don't we do individual voice notes? Why don't we record the screen and then use our own voice to portray the wants and desires behind what we want the players to do? Because they're going to feel our passion. They're going to feel our excitement. They're going to embody then why we're asking them to do what we're asking them to do. And we're not giving them video saying, look at your shot, it was terrible. We're saying, look at this opportunity where if you thought first and moved now, hypothesize what you could have done in a few seconds time. And when you're talking about the way we're talking now, you can get excited by that kind of stuff. And I think that's an area where we've got really good, where Mark has led us to, and ultimately, which allows us to have only 6 game principles and not have 45 slide presentations on how our team plays, because quite frankly, even elite players, I'm not sure they need that level of scaffolding, you know.